Control is an illusion. Influence is earned. And if they don't feel safe with you, they will not give it to you. Hi, I'm Dr. Denham Slade. Parenting early adolescence is one of the most difficult phases of parenting for most parents. And the only thing that is more difficult than parenting that stage of development is actually being in that stage of development. It's a really, really challenging time, especially the latter end of early adolescence. Early adolescence is defined pretty broadly from like 10 to 15. But I want to focus in really on the time from 13 to 15. It is one of the most challenging phases of development as kids are going through adolescence. And it's a real time of, it's a time of great upheaval for several reasons. One, almost every area of development is in flux, emotionally, socially, physically, sexually, cognitively, spiritually. It is a time of tremendous instability as all of those different areas of development are in transition. There are several reasons for that, but one of the reasons that makes this period, this 13 to 15 period, so acutely challenging is because of formal operational thought. And simply put, formal operational thought is the ability to think about thinking. It marks the beginning of identity formation because prior to this, our brains just kind of think compartmentally. When we're playing sports, we're playing sports. When we're at home, we're at home. When we're at school, we're at school. When we're at church, we're at church. And there's not a cohesive sense of identity yet. What enables us as human beings to begin to form our sense of identity, which starts at about 13 or 14 and goes up until around 25 when the frontal lobes finally finish developing, is this onset of formal operational thought. And what it creates is this ability to metacognate, to instead of just being in the scene, all of a sudden we're able to be above the scene. We're able to see and think about what's going on. And so all of a sudden I'm able to think about thinking, and I'm able to think about what I think other people think about me. And that ability, which is an ability and a really important one for us as human beings, also wreaks havoc with development for a couple of years. Because what ends up happening is these poor kids are suddenly dealing with life-size feelings, with full-size, mega-size emotions, and they don't know how to do it yet. And so it literally is like being put on the back of a stallion and slapping that stallion on the butt, and away you're going, and the poor kid's trying to stay on and trying to cope. And so what ends up happening is we end up saying and doing a lot of things that are not very nice. This is a stage of development where a lot of bullying takes place. And it happens because everybody's trying to figure out how to matter. It also a really important task of this stage of development is what we call niche finding. And kids that find a niche during this phase of development do much better than kids that don't find a niche. And a niche is defined as, compared to the masses, I am good at this. And the research actually shows that it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's a sport or band or academics or 4-H or student government. But kids that find a niche do much better developmentally than kids that do not find a niche. And part of that is because it gives them a sense of, yeah, I fit here. And this is an area where I feel good about myself. And that's a really important factor. But I've parented 3 kids through this stage of development, and I've worked with tens, if not hundreds of kids through this stage of development. Adolescent development is one of my areas of expertise. When I was doing my doctorate program, this was one of my areas of emphasis. And so I love adolescent development, and it's a phase of life that I actually really like working with. And it's really challenging for these kids as they work through this phase of development, and it's hard to parent well. As I've parented kids through this phase, I've seen firsthand the the challenges that they face. One of the experiences that one of my kids had during this phase of development really underscores some of the challenges. And cell phones these days, that's one of the things that I didn't have to deal with when I was going through this stage of development a day or two ago. And that actually really amplifies some of the challenges of this stage of development. One example that occurred with one of my kids is one of his friends in a friend group had posted a snapshot of a conversation between two kids in this friend group being critical of my child, not reflecting him in a very positive light, which really hurt his feelings. And so he came to us and he's like, told us what was going on and how it had hurt his feelings, and asked for help in being able to kind of navigate through it. And so I woke up one morning, I was on a trip actually at a conference, and woke up to a text saying, please call if you can. And so I called and they told me what was going on. I helped him write a response, and he wrote a really good response saying, why his feelings were hurt and how he had felt about the situation. And as frequently happens, some of the people in the group didn't respond very well. They got defensive and insinuated that my son was overreacting to this situation. And pretty quickly, feelings got elevated. The average 11-year-old will have better judgment than a lot of 13 and 14-year-olds. If you look at the graph of judgment dips during this stage of development, right when we're experiencing all of these other challenges in development. And so one of the biggest mistakes that parents make during this period of time is to be way too hands-off. Your kids need help navigating this stage of development. That doesn't mean that you need to be in the middle of everything. It doesn't mean that you need to be doing it for them, but you absolutely need to be helping them develop the skills to be able to handle this stage of development. Frequently, this is when romantic relationships first start, and so they're feeling love and they're feeling intense attachment and connection with people, again, without the cognitive development yet to be able to manage and effectively navigate the intensity of those feelings. And so you need to be monitoring what's going on with their texts. You need to be talking to them about interactions that they're having with their friends. You need to know what the different dynamics are. Who's crushing on who or who's liking who. You need to be asking questions. You need to be spending time with them and their peers, having them over to your house so that you can help your child navigate this period of time well. If you think about it, most people do not end up being friends with who they're friends with in like 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And that's because as we're learning how to handle these things, we typically make lots of mistakes. We typically hurt lots of feelings. We typically get our feelings hurt a lot. And so then it really kind of turns out being these relationships where we screw it up as we're practicing it. And then by about age 16, that's when kids typically kind of start coming out of the other side of this, and they're able to manage some of the nuances and the more complicated aspects of social interactions and what's going on inside of them. And a lot of times the wreckage ends up being those relationships, and people end up being friends with new people as they've kind of developed through and out of a lot of those relationships that were going on during the end phase of early adolescence. It's really tough to be trying to practice being vulnerable and open in ways, communicating well in ways when, by definition, the people that you're communicating with are not safe to communicate with. And so like the situation with my son, he's trying to figure out, he was trying to figure out during this situation, like, are these guys really my friends? Do they want to be my friends? Are they the kind of people that I want to invest in? And when you start realizing that maybe this isn't the best place for you to be, that's a really scary moment also, because pain motivates us. And if we're getting some of our emotional and social needs met, even if they're not being met in a healthy way, it's really hard to want to leave some of what's working, some of what's, I at least have somebody to eat lunch with. I at least have people to hang out with before school or after school. I at least have something to do on Friday night. Even when you realize that, like, this probably isn't a really great environment for me, it's really scary and difficult to leave that for nothing. To leave that for the opportunity to go find something else. And so a lot of kids will end up staying in unhealthy relationships and unhealthy friend groups and really kind of being damaged or compromised by that because it's too scary for them to develop something else. And so again, you want to help your kid navigate through that and help them begin to look for opportunities to develop other things. Another thing that I would really, as a parent, don't be overly reactive to some of the normal developmental things of this phase of life. It's normal for kids as they start establishing their identity. It's normal for them to question, like, do I believe what I've always believed? So religion is typically like, do I believe in what I've always been taught? Do I believe in God? Do I believe in the scriptures? Do I believe because prior to this, it's just what we've been taught and we don't take any consideration, but all of a sudden this ability to think about thinking makes us think, well, do I really believe that? And sometimes that can go to values, what do I think about drinking? What do I think about sexuality? What do I think about stealing or cheating or whatever? Things that hadn't been considered before suddenly need to be considered. And this is begins the process of a kid really beginning to own, and that's the process. When this is done well, a kid enters this phase of development really not owning any of those things, and if they navigate it well, they exit into adulthood with a firm sense of who they are, what they believe, and it's your job to be sensitive and available to them. If you don't overreact, they will come to you, and if you ask questions and provided opportunities, they will come to you and you will be able to help them navigate this stage of development. Two things that I want you to remember about this. Your job as a parent is to do everything in your power to help your child be able to run her or his life well when they leave you, when they launch into adulthood. You want to help them develop the skills, the confidence, the abilities to be able to run their lives well on their own when they leave you. So if you keep that in mind, that can really help you filter a lot of that. The second thing that I want you to keep in mind with that is that as a child moves through adolescence, your influence, your ability to influence what's going on moves from high levels of control to influence. When a child enters adolescence, you still have a lot of control over a lot. You can control whether they have a phone or not. You can control when they come in. You can control what they see, what they don't see to a large degree because you have all the power. But as they work through adolescence and as autonomy pushes them more and more external, then in order for you to be able to maintain influence in their lives, influence has to be granted. Influence can't be commanded, it can't be controlled. And so if your relationship isn't safe, isn't sound, isn't solid, then you will lose your ability to influence your children as they move through adolescence and into adulthood. If you are a safe place to go for them to process, you don't overreact, you don't make them feel bad for what they're thinking or feeling, you help them be able to navigate their thoughts and emotions, you continue to be a secure base, a place where they feel like they matter and they're safe, then they will continue to give you high levels of influence in their lives. But if they don't feel those things with you, they will decrease the influence and they might tell you what you want to hear or what they think you want to hear to your face, and then they'll do whatever they want when they're not with you. But if your relationship is sound, then you will maintain high levels of influence in their lives. This can be one of the best times to parent. parenting adolescents can be such a wonderful time if you go on that ride in a healthy way with your kids.